guys so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Hopefully after today you'll find something of value that you can take back to your classrooms. Before I get started, I'd like to do some good things. Anybody have anything they'd like to share? Yes, sir.
I went to a shooting range.
You went to a shooting range? Okay, that's awesome. How's your shooting skills?
Better than hers.
Better than, okay. All right, awesome. How about you? Would you like to share anything?
He missed more than me.
Okay.
He missed more targets than me.
All right, well, that's fun. Shooting range. They have a new one here in town, I do believe, right?
I don't know. The one we went to was called like a high caliber gun range.
Okay. All right. Well, I have something I'd like to share too. My daughter, we know, well, most everybody knows, she's in Korea, and she's going off on some new adventure. As a matter of fact, Wednesday, she leaves to go to Thailand for a week. And from Thailand then, she's going to be doing some scuba diving there. From Thailand, then she goes to Vietnam for a week. And when she gets back to Korea, she's going to spend about a week in Seoul. So I'm really jealous because we have always done our traveling together, and now she's off on her own doing all kinds of wonderful things. All right, so the reason that you're here today is because recently in my last class of my master's program, we had to read this, we needed to read this book. And the book is called Explicit Instruction, Effective and Efficient Teaching. When I first read the title, I thought, well, why do I need to read this book about teaching? Because I thought, this is a master's program for administration education. And as I contemplated that, I thought, well, what is an administrator? An administrator is in fact, an instructional leader. So in order for us to be good instructional leaders as administrators, we have to know how to teach. So I read it with an open mind, and I found some really amazing things inside of it. So Anita Archer and Charles Hughes are the responsible people for this excellent read. And just to tell you a little bit about Anita and Charles, I'm calling them Anita and Charlie because I feel like I know them after reading their book. I feel like I know a little bit about their personality, and I feel like if they knew me, we would be friends. So Anita, she's a PhD, and she's an educational consultant specializing in explicit instruction. And explicit instruction is the design and delivery of instruction. Nothing more than that. Well, I shouldn't say nothing more than that, but that's basically what it is. It's the design and delivery of instruction. She's written many books on the topic and also does speaking engagements. What gives her, what is it that makes her an expert in this field? Well, she's the recipient of 10 Outstanding Educator Awards, has taught elementary and middle school students, and has been a faculty member at several universities within the country. So I feel like she is an expert. So I gave her, I acknowledged her wealth of knowledge when I read the book. Now Charles Hughes, he's also a PhD, and he's a professor of special education at the Pennsylvania State University and an adjunct senior scientist, I thought that was amazing, at the University of Kansas Center for Research on Learning. And prior to him coming to Penn State, as the professor of special education, he worked in schools for 14 years as a general teacher and as a special ed teacher. He also worked at the state level as a consultant, and he was an educational diagnostician. So I know some of you are actually going to school to become counselors and special ed. Some of you actually are certified special ed, so it might be something that you will do one day. Write an amazing book for me to read to help me to do better at my job. So anyway, that's a little bit about Anita and Charles. All right, so when I started reading the book, I thought, well, this is an awesome and interesting things. And I thought, well, some of the stuff I already know and I already do. And oftentimes I do it, but I don't actually put a term or a name to it. So I don't put a name to it, I just do it because that's what good teachers do. These are good, sound instructional strategies that we use in the classroom already. But when I got to chapter 3, and it said vocabulary, explicit and, how to teach vocabulary in an explicit and engaging way, my ears perked up, and I got really excited because I thought, this is an area that I struggle with. I struggle in teaching vocabulary. So I proceeded to read, and before I get into what I was reading, I just give you a couple little stats. These stats come from the U.S. Department of Education, and I believe it was from some studies that they did in 2013. I couldn't find anything more recent, but it's probably still the same kind of information. So it said federal studies suggest a student's reading performance may not improve until they have a better grasp of vocabulary. Now, as teachers, you probably are thinking, duh, as I was. Okay, that makes sense. If they don't have a good grasp of vocabulary, how are they going to comprehend everything that they read? And so they kind of go hand in hand. But sometimes we just need to see it written down in black and white from the U.S. Department of Education for us to take heed of this information. All right, another statistic, vocabulary and reading comprehension. Again, they go hand in hand. Vocabulary skills nationwide closely track the reading comprehension nationwide. I believe this was a study of 4th graders. The top 25% of readers turned in an average of 255 vocabulary points out of a 500-point scale. It's still not a great deal, but it is more than 50%. And the bottom fourth, I should say, the weakest 25% only scored 177 points out of 500. So there is a huge, there's lots of data that shows a huge discrepancy in the level of vocabulary for all of our kids. All right, well, what is explicit instruction? All right, so what I want you to do, I gave you some paper there, and I'm going to give you some dictionaries. I want you to go ahead and look up the word explicit in the dictionary. Okay? Give you a minute. Once you find that word explicit in the dictionary, then I want you to write down the definition, write down the part of speech, and oh, by the way, I want you to use it in a sentence 3 times. After you do that, you're bound to have a good grasp of the definition of explicit. Am I right? That's funny, isn't it? That's what we used to do. Okay, you don't have to look it up anymore. Here, I'll take those dictionaries back. You don't have to look it up anymore. I was making a point. The point is, explicit instruction does not mean that we put our kids in front of a dictionary with a pen and a piece of paper and have them write down, copy the definitions, and then use them 10 times or 3 times in a sentence, and then think that they know it. All right, so explicit instruction is, in fact, a systematic instructional approach that includes a set of delivery and design procedures derived from effective school research. Basically what that means is that it's just teaching us a set of practices that, through research, has proven to have a positive effect on learning outcomes. All right, so basically it's what are we doing to help the kids gain more knowledge? So before they could tell us how to teach this, they had to come up with a set of characteristics that for explicit instruction. And these characteristics for effective vocabulary instruction say that we have to go beyond the traditional method of search and study, which is what I just had you guys do. I gave you a dictionary. I say, here, look this word up. Write the definition, write the part of speech, and then use it in a sentence. That worked for some, because when I was a kid, that actually worked for me. And then I studied the words, and then I passed the test. And I say it worked for me. I studied it and knew it long enough to pass the test, and at some point, maybe I forgot those words. If we never saw them again, I probably forgot them. And that's a topic that we bring up here in a little bit. So yes, we have to go beyond that idea, of just looking the words up in the dictionary and copying them down. All right. The next characteristic of effective vocabulary instruction says that the word meanings, they have to be unambiguous. And there's a big word right there. If our kids didn't know, we'd have to teach that one to them. Unambiguous. They have to be clear. We have to use them with contextual examples. We can't just say, okay, here's the definition of this word unambiguous. It means clear. And make sure you know that, because we're going to read about it. We're going to use that word or see that word in the text that we're going to read here in a little bit. So that doesn't help either. So we have to make sure that we give them the term, the definition, and use it in however it needs to be used in the context of, in the context of the lesson, basically. How is it that we want them to know this word? So that's another characteristic. A third characteristic is that we have to expose them to these target words multiple times. It says generally kids, general education, kids that learn rather well, they might be able to retain information about a word if they're exposed to it anywhere from 5 to 8 times. And they say maybe an average of 10. But kids that don't learn well, that struggle with learning, SPED kids, ELLs, it might take them upwards of 40 times to be exposed to a word before they can grasp that meaning and add it to their lexicon. We want them to be able to do this. If we're teaching them definitions and teaching them words, we want them to add it to their list of vocabulary words that they can hear and understand, that they can use anytime that they have the opportunity to do so. And the last characteristic, and I shouldn't say last, but the last one that we talked about, that I'll say Anita and Charlie talked about in here, that the researchers came up with, is that students must be actively engaged in word learning, instruction, and review. If they are not actively engaged, if they're sitting at the desk, staring blankly into space, acting like they're taking notes or listening with one ear and they're thinking about what they're doing, and you don't have any kind of active engagement for them, they're not going to learn these words. So these are the characteristics for effective vocabulary instruction. We have to do something more than the traditional look it up in the dictionary. We have to make sure the definitions are clear. We have to expose them to these words. Another thing that I thought about when I've always wanted to have a word wall, and I thought sometimes it's hard to put all of the words in the word wall, so I thought about just having a word wall for myself. And on that word wall, I would put words that the class, my students have discussed, and I want them to learn so that I can add them into lessons later, not just the ones that we're talking about in this particular unit. I want to make sure that these words that we're learning here for this unit, I use again in the next unit, and the unit after that, and any time that I can actually use it. Maybe just them passing in the hallway. If I see them at the Walmart, I don't know, wherever I can get them to use or expose them to this word again. And then, of course, we have to make them engaged. All right, so before we can actually teach the vocabulary, we have to prepare how we're going to do that. What words are we going to use? So Anita and Charlie gave us some tips for preparing to teach vocabulary. The first thing that they told us that we need to do is select the appropriate vocabulary. After that, we need to determine how each word's meaning is going to be conveyed to the students. And this is one word that I use over and over and over again in my classroom because I see that a lot of times on tests. And the students don't necessarily know what conveyed means. And so I kind of give them an example of how they might see it using the conveyor belts in the Walmart. So this is one of the words that I've taught explicitly and make sure that the kids know it. I expose them to it over and over again. But it just so happens to be in it just happens to be here in the tips that we need to do as far as to prepare for the teaching of vocabulary. I'm sorry. Okay, and the third tip here for preparing explicit vocabulary lessons is to develop examples. And this is one of the areas where I fall short too. I don't always give explicit examples of what this word looks like or how it's properly used in sentences. And then it says non-examples. I hardly ever do that. So this really opened up my mind, my eyes, and I thought, this is just perfect. This is exactly what the kids need. They need examples and they need non-examples. This is not how you would use this word. Staff, for instance. I'll get to that one in a little bit. All right, so as far as selecting, the first thing, selecting appropriate vocabulary for explicit instruction. My notes closed on me. Anita and Charlie also gave us some guidelines for doing this. How are we going to select these words? Well, I've always given the authors of our textbooks far too much credit. So whenever I taught a unit, I would look at the words that the authors said that we should teach the kids, and I would teach them, even though sometimes I thought, well, they probably know this word already. Why am I teaching them this? Well, the author of the textbook said to do it, and they're the ones making a lot of money. And so I did it. I'm guilty. After reading this, this was a truly mind-opening, it was just really exciting to me. And it made me know that, you know what, I have been empowered as their teacher to know what they need to know. So if I know that the kids already have a good, strong understanding of a particular word, say the word is secret. If we're reading a passage and the authors of that passage think that the word secret needs to be explained or elaborated on, I would say as sixth graders that these kids already know what secret is. They have knowledge of a secret. They probably have a secret. They've kept a secret. They've told a secret. They understand what secret means. So I probably, at this point, after reading what Charlie and Anita have told me, I would not explicitly teach that word. I might review it quickly just to make sure, but I wouldn't. So that's the first guideline that they give us. Select words that are unknown. If they already know the words, don't waste instructional time explicitly teaching these words. A quick review, maybe not even a review. Maybe there's a context clue in the book that you can just say, okay, remember secret means something that you're not supposed to tell somebody else. All right. Another guideline that they say to use for selecting your vocabulary is to select the words that are important to the understanding or passage of the unit. Understanding a passage or unit. That also seems obvious, but sometimes, like I said, if one of the words that I thought the kids needed to know wasn't highlighted or bolded by the text authors, I would wonder why, and I might not have added that to my list. And I don't know if it's a seasoned teacher, but I've been teaching for several years. So I'll say that maybe new teachers, they might have the same kind of idea. Well, the textbook says to teach these words. It doesn't say to teach this word. But again, it's up to us as the teacher. We know our kids best. We know the culture that our kids live in. We know more about our kids basically than the author of that textbook does. So we need to decide as teachers. We need to decide what words these kids need to know and what's going to help them to better understand the passage. All right, now I've hit something. There. All right. Another guideline that they offer us for selecting vocabulary is to select the words that the students are going to hear, read, write, and say in the future. It kind of goes along with the last one. What are the ones that are going to be important for them to know to understand a passage, but what are the ones that are going to be important for them to know to get along in life? So some of these words are words that they pick up at home, and we consider those words tier 1 words. These are the common words, and these are known to most all of our kids. Oftentimes, they don't require any more than just a quick review or quick, just a little, okay, basically a quick review, like I just said, little quick review of what that word might mean to help us move along. It might be a simple word like, maybe some science word, like the definition of, a hair. Instead of saying hair, or instead of saying rabbit, maybe they use the word hair. We could just remind them that, hair is the same thing as rabbit. It's not like the hair on your head. And just to move on from there, you don't need to spend a whole lot of instructional time. But again, these are the common words, the Tier 1 words that most of the kids know, and we don't need to spend a lot of instructional time on it. The Tier 2 words, these are the ones that are the more mature speakers and readers know, but not all of our kids. You can probably think right now about some of the kids in your classroom that have a much more mature vocabulary than some of the others. These would be words that those kids would know. But the others might need more instruction in it. So these might be ones that we want to add to our explicitly instructed, to our list that we explicitly instruct. And in secondary school, we might call these words academic vocabulary. Like for instance, analyze. Over here today. In fact, I talked to my kids about analyze today. Some of them know what it is. We've talked about it before, but some of them had the blank stares on the face, so I had to break it down for them again to explicitly instruct what the word analyze means, because they're going to see that word, they're going to use that word, they need to know it. They're going to use it in their writing, in science labs, in history. They might have to analyze the cause and effect of a situation. In reading class, they might have to analyze the outcome of a particular passage. So they need to know that. So I explicitly instructed that again today. And Tier 3 words, these are the low frequency words. These would be more like words that would pertain explicitly to a certain content area. So here, I lost my notes again. Plus, your ears probably need a break from me talking incessantly. All right. Maybe it's not there. All right. So, but these are the ones that we would use. Like, for instance, I think I was thinking about here, like the terms in English class, ethos and pathos and logos. Some of those terms we might, because it's those are relating to persuasion. So those might not be words that they hear in other domains, but we would need to explain them explicitly in our English classes. All right. And the fourth guideline that Charlie and Anita said that we should probably use to help identify what words to select for explicit instruction, are the words that are difficult to learn and need more interpretation. And these are some factors that increase the word's difficulty. Is that the right term? Let's see. Let me just read it. These are the factors that increase a word's level of learning difficulty. A couple of them up here. Words that label unknown or complex. I'm thinking ahead. I'm so sorry. Words that label unknown or complex concepts or ideas. Oftentimes, these new words that we want to bring to the kids have synonyms that the kids already know. So these words might not require a whole lot of instruction. If we say, hey, this is just a synonym for this word that you already know, you already understand this concept. So depending on how unknown the concept is, would it depend on whether that word is difficult to learn or not. I mean, this is where I was talking to you about something that would be more difficult to learn would be the ethos and the pathos and the logos, because they know what persuasion is, but maybe they don't quite understand it as far as ethical and emotional or logical persuasion. So we might have to go into more detail. Well, I'll tell you, we have to go into more detail when explaining terms like this. All right, another factor that increases the level of difficulty in words is, are they addressed through the context clues? Sometimes words the authors didn't put the meaning of the word in the passage, whether it be right in the sentence or the passage or the paragraph before or after. And so we have to spend a little bit more time in helping them to understand it, depending on, because if they don't understand it, then they're not going to have a great understanding of they're not going to have any comprehension of what the passage is talking about. So depending on whether my brain is just trying to shut down, so I apologize. So whether the term is addressed in the context clues or not. If it's addressed in the context clues, then you're not going to need to spend a whole lot of time with, now my brain just froze. A lot of instructional time with it. You can just simply, review the meaning as it is right there. If it doesn't have the definition there, then that's when you might need to spend a little bit more time on it. All right, words related to abstract or non-concrete ideas. Kids at this age, and I'm talking 6th graders, they sometimes struggle with abstract to begin with. So if we talk about words like compulsion, they might have compulsions, but they may not understand it completely. So we try to find ways to relate with them and explicitly teach words like compulsion. For instance, many kids these days are compulsive about that game Fortnite. So that would be a good way to teach this word. And compulsion is something that kids 6th grade should be understanding and knowing. So that's a good way. They understand the whole concrete idea of that game Fortnite, but the whole abstract idea of compulsion is something new for them. So if it's abstract, we might need to give them a little bit more extended learning. Okay, the words that are difficult to pronounce. I know sometimes, and I'll just relate this to kids' names. Kids' names sometimes are just difficult to pronounce. And I'll say it different ways, and then the next day when I see them, I'll think, how did I say it? How did I say it? And I can't quite grasp it. So it makes it hard to remember it. Same thing with words. If we can't remember how to pronounce the word, if we don't know how to pronounce the word, it's going to make it a lot harder for us to learn the meaning and then be able to apply it when necessary. All right, so depending on how difficult they are to pronounce. Yes, if they can't pronounce the word, where are they going to store it in their memory, and how are they going to add it to their vocabulary? So that's a difficult one. And then about words that require additional interpretation. These would be words that that have a different literal meaning or a different figurative meaning from their literal meaning. And in fact, here's an example. Staff. Kids grow up in elementary school, well, even before elementary school, maybe they go to church and they hear about Moses' staff. And so they know it's a big, tall thing that they hold on to. It has a hook at the top. Then they get into elementary school and they hear about the staff, the school staff, and they know that it's talking about the teachers and the principal and all the staff. And then they get into music class and they realize that the teachers or the music instructor then talks about the staff on the music sheet. And then they're thinking, well, why they might get confused at this point, thinking, well, why are they talking about the teachers being here on this music page? This is my music teacher. There's other teachers. So these kinds of things they might have problems with. So we need to interpret for them different multiple meanings, different levels of meanings, those connotation meanings, the denotation meanings. All right, and then idioms. I had this the other day. We were talking about growth mindset, and I read to them a quote from Margaret Thatcher. And the quote is, "You may have to fight a battle more than once to win it." You may have to fight a battle more than once to win it. And so the kids were taking this literally, fighting a battle. So they were talking about swords and knives and how they were going to fight someone. And I thought, and I never thought about that until I presented it to the kids, because I just wanted them to tell me what did Margaret Thatcher mean by this. Well, they took it as a literal meaning, like, oh, you're going to have to fight. You're going to have to, come in combat with this person. So I had to explain to them then the difference between the literal meaning and the figurative meaning to it. Yes. All right. So these are some factors that we need to consider as teachers to determine what level of difficulty is this word. Do we need to spend zero amount of time on it, a little bit extra amount of time on it, or an extensive amount of time on it to teach them the meaning of it so that they can understand in context as they're reading through passages and increase their reading comprehension. Now, again, these are the tips. Select the words that are unknown. Select the words that are important to understanding the passage. Select words that the students are going to hear and read and use in their writing and say in the future. And then select the words that are difficult to learn or need interpretation. All right, so now I have a little bit of quiz. I have a little quiz for us. All right. So I have a couple vocabulary terms, and then I want to see if you guys, what you guys think about the amount of instruction we might need for this word, and then maybe the rationale behind it. Are you ready? All right. Monsieur. All right, suppose you're reading a passage, and suddenly the word monsieur comes up. It's not bolded, but the kids kind of give you that look. Is this one of those words that you would spend a lot of time on? Would you pre-teach it? Is it one of those ones that require explicit instruction? Or what? What do you think? I'm asking no time, little time, or extended instruction. What do you think? Monsieur.
Extended instruction.
You think? Do we have synonyms that the kids might know that means monsieur? Monsieur. I think it's French. What might it mean? What is, yes, it's just it's a different word for Mr. Our kids know Mr. So I think the right amount of instruction for this word monsieur would be brief. This is just another word for Mr. and move on. Monsieur, would you like another cup of coffee? Thank you, monsieur. You know, and then we can just move on. Again, if the kids already know synonyms for these words, even if the author of that text bolded it and said, I want you to teach this explicitly, if we know the kids already know it, why are we don't want us to waste instructional time on those words. Here's the next one. Loitering. As sixth graders, as middle school students, I think this is an important word. So how much time do you, I already told you. All right, how much time do you think we should spend on instruction of the word loitering? All right, so suppose you're out in the hallway and you're yelling, hey, stop loitering in the hallway. And the kids look at you and say, I didn't throw anything on the ground. I didn't litter. I'm like, no, I said loitering. So maybe at this age, we might need to spend a little bit extra time on this word loitering because they might hear it in the mall. They might stand outside in front of some of the shops, and the shop owners, the shop workers come out and say, hey, get away from here, stop loitering. The kids need to know what that means because if they don't, like I said, it might sound a lot like littering to them. They get mad and say, I'm not littering, I didn't throw anything on the ground. You know how then it can create conflict there. But if they know what loitering means, they can use it, they can hear it, they can say it, they can understand it if they can read it in context. So yes, I think loitering requires a little bit of explicit instruction because this is one of those words that, again, we need to add to their lexicon so they can use it over and over again. Adventure, as sixth graders. How many adventures have the kids already had? And even in elementary school, they probably talk about these adventures, maybe even magical adventures. Like, what is that series, the Magical School Bus, where they go on lots of adventures? The Magic School Bus, okay. So, yeah, so they probably have heard this word a lot of times. They've probably been exposed to it over 40 times by now. So they might know adventure. Even after school, you know, hey, come on, Mom's going to pick you up. We're going to go on a new adventure. Ooh, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? Yeah, so they probably know this one. So do you think we need to spend any time on this instruction? Probably not. So I would say none. And the rationale, again, is because by the time they're in sixth grade, they probably have had many adventures already. All right, what do you think? Is this something that you take back to your classroom and use with your students?
Definitely.
Definitely, yes. Okay, and like I said, it's stuff that we probably already knew, but like I said, this chapter really empowered me as a teacher because I just felt like if people were writing these textbooks and they said to teach this word, even if I didn't spend a lot of time on it, I still spent some time on it when the kids maybe already knew the word because I didn't feel empowered because I was not the writer of the text. But now I know that, you know what, they don't know my students as well as I do. I'm the one that knows my students. I know what my students need. So I'm the one who gets to decide what words I teach them and how much time I spend on teaching them. All right, so this wraps up the first step of teaching vocabulary, the first step, okay? It might, in fact, be what wins the battle for you. I made a reference to that Margaret Thatcher quote. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so if you preload your lesson with vocabulary the students need to help with comprehension, the kiddos will have a better opportunity to be successful. All right, so remember, explicit vocabulary instruction, help me out here, helps kiddos learn for the future and not just for the now. All right, do you have any questions about anything that you heard? Or maybe you have anything that you want to share about how you do vocabulary? All right, well, thank you for coming. And again, this is just the first section, and I'll let you know when I'm ready to present the second. Thank you, guys.